Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Maybe just drop in the chat if you can hear me to start. Cool. Awesome. Okay. Welcome. If folks want to put your name and who you're with or where you're joining from in the chat, and we also just have a poll just to kind of get a sense of who's here. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for being here today, and I just want to start by acknowledging that this is taking place in a pretty devastating week for the arts in America, with substantial cuts announced to the National Endowment for the Arts and its grantees. And our thoughts go out to all of you who are either directly or indirectly impacted. Today is the second panel we're doing in a series with Next City this spring around the launch of the Routledge Handbook of Urban Cultural Planning, edited by Jason Schupbach and Rana Amir Tamasebi. Jason, who was formerly director of creative placemaking at the National Endowment for the Arts, has been saying a lot recently that, even as we hold space for this moment of creative destruction, can we also orient ourselves towards what is generative and possible, even in the midst of all this? And I hope that spirit will guide our conversation today. We have 3 authors from the book who are all experts in their own right, along with the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Co-op, which is featured in a case study by Angie Kim from the Center for Cultural Innovations chapter. And I'm Rebecca Greenwald. I'm a storytelling and engagement strategist, and I've had the pleasure of working with Jason and Rana to start more mainstream conversations about the role of culture in cities around the book. In the first part, we're going to look at models and approaches for supporting cultural workers, starting with Laura Zabel of Springboard for the Arts, and then going to Nati Linares of Art Tech Co-op. In the back half, we'll be turning to models and approaches for supporting cultural spaces with Erica Henneberry from the City of Toronto, and wrapping up with Annie McShiris about their work in Oakland. And we're planning to leave ample time for audience questions, so please use the Q&A function. And I would love to hand it over to Laura to kick us off.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here with you. I'm really pleased to be a part of this session and get to learn from all the other panelists. Becca, grateful to Next City for having us all. I'm going to get my screen share set up here. All right. Like Rebecca said, I'm Laura Zabel. I am the executive director of Springboard for the Arts. Springboard is an economic justice and community development organization run by and for artists. We are based in Minnesota, both in the urban neighborhood of Frogtown and Rondo in St. Paul, and in a rural community called Fergus Falls, which is in west central Minnesota. And in addition to our place-based work here in Minnesota, we also steward a national network of other place-based organizations called the Creative Change Coalition. This is Springboard's strategic plan. I'm only partly joking, but this is how we think about our work, these three interconnected visions for the future, a future where artists are essential and part of vibrant and just local economies and human-centered systems. And those aren't like three separate goals. They're three things that we believe are dependent on one another to bring to fruition. I want to start by just kind of grounding us in, because we're here under the umbrella of Next City and a kind of lens of community planning, just ground us in that idea of why I think culture and creativity matter to community planning, and maybe a kind of alternative way of thinking about that, even if that's something that you're kind of already bought into. I think traditionally, urban planners, community planners come to arts and culture from the perspective of a product or a project, a public art piece or a specific artist designed project in their community. And of course, those things are really valuable and have all kinds of impacts on community planning and on healthier communities. But I am more interested in the idea that it is actually the presence of creative people and the cultural opportunities that they create in an ongoing way and for everyone that is this essential building block of healthy communities. And I think that presence of culture and creativity, and specifically supporting creative people, is a really big part of creating community health, particularly around social connection and social infrastructure. I think right now we are for sure in a moment where we see how essential it is for people to have relationships with their neighbors, whether that is to lead to mutual aid or other care networks. Like, we need these local social connections and infrastructure. And also specifically from a community planning lens, I think the presence of creative people and cultural opportunity are a huge part of steps we can take towards repair of extraction and of damage that have been caused by previous urban and community planning efforts, particularly when you think about things like redlining, the interstate highway system, and other kinds of toxic infrastructure like trash burners, et cetera. A lot of what is harmed in the process of those kind of projects at its root is about theft or extraction of culture. So if we start from the perspective that it's creative people that matter, then communities need strategies to support creative people and to make sure they can live and stay in the communities that they care about and have been a part of making and building. And that's really what led Springboard to guaranteed income and to the movement around guaranteed income and direct cash support programs. Many of you probably already know this, but just here is a kind of basic definition of guaranteed income. One of the reasons we came to this work was really coming out of the pandemic and having done a lot of emergency relief work and understanding at a really deep level that artists are really often occupying a gray area between small business owner and gig worker. And in that gray area, there is a lot of safety net gap, as there is for a lot of other people in those categories, and really looking for strategies that felt more systemic, trying to move beyond emergency relief into actual system change. So in early 2021, alongside the city of St. Paul and their citywide guaranteed income program, we stood up our guaranteed income pilot, which over time has now grown to be a pilot that includes 100 artists, in half in St. Paul in our neighborhood here and half in the rural community where Springboard is based in Otter Tail County. And this fall, we announced that the total time period for our pilot is 5 years, which makes Springboard's pilot one of the longest running guaranteed income pilots in the country, not just for artists, but for anyone. In addition to piloting the idea of guaranteed income, our other goals were really around demonstrating that artists can be powerful allies around narrative change and storytelling and movement building, and also adding to the national body of research around guaranteed income, particularly demonstrating an impact on the creative community and on place-based communities. So now we are, 4 years in to this work, and we have some learnings to share. And so I'm just going to go through some of those pieces uh, and share a little bit about what we've learned. One of the things that I've really come to believe deeply in is guaranteed income as a tool for repair and for specificity in place. So in both of the communities that we work with in Frogtown and Rondo, we are rooted in the Rondo neighborhood. That is St. Paul's historic Black neighborhood that was bisected by the interstate highway. So there was a huge extraction and theft of wealth, generational wealth, and culture. And so thinking about supporting creative people here has to come from that history. In Ottertail County, these are communities that are undergoing tremendous economic transformation and trying to make big economic changes and dealing with other kinds of workforce issues, and also trying to figure out, how to be communities that are welcoming to newcomers. And so thinking about how guaranteed income supporting creative people in that context, those contexts are different. They have some connections, but they also are important to kind of build in to how you're designing the project. The other piece we put a lot of emphasis on is learning about artists' role in narrative change. We have worked with several groups of artists, some of whom are participants in our pilot and some of whom are not. This is not at all a requirement of being in the guaranteed income program, and these artists are paid separately to design projects that are really about telling the story of guaranteed income. And I'll just lift up a couple. This is a beautiful project by Brianna Williams. It's a coloring book, and I love this example because I think a lot of people think about narrative change as like an op-ed or hiring a marketing firm or policy advocacy. But Brianna created a project that's for children, and I think we have to think about the story we're telling our young people if we're going to actually change these like deeply rooted narratives, especially about money and deservingness and human value. Another project I love is this project by Candace Krill Falcone, who's an artist in rural Earhart, Minnesota, who is an artist and also a goat tender. She made this beautiful painting of her goats, and we turned it into a billboard on Highway 210. And it really is her connection between guaranteed income and rural values, and particularly this idea of tending to the herd. And there's a beautiful piece on her website that really talks about how she sees the connection between goats and guaranteed income and the values that her community holds, which I think is a great example of telling a story that's rooted in the ideas that come from an actual place and from the culture of that place. We've also put a big emphasis on research, and I could get into much more of this in the Q&A if you're interested. We've kind of focused our research on two pieces. One is research that's aligned with the research that's happening on a lot of other pilots. So I like to say this graphic is a demonstration that artists are people like everyone else. We knew that before, but now the Stanford Basic Income Lab site says it, so it must be true. But you can see here, artists spend the money just like everyone else does on their basic needs. And then in a more in-depth way, we've worked with the Center for Guaranteed Income Research at the University of Pennsylvania to really surface these deeper findings about the impact of supporting artists. And we're midway through this project, but I can just say like part of this has been so joyful because it really reinforces like just supporting people with a safety net and with basic stability really has this huge impact and benefit to the whole community in terms of the work that artists are able to create, and particularly the ways that they're able to create work and want to create work for their own communities versus based on what they think a funder or some other gatekeeper wants them to do. And then finally, one of my favorite things about the whole movement around guaranteed income is that it really roots policy change and policy advocacy in trying something first. So rather than just seeing this as a policy advocacy strategy, all of the work that's happening across the country is really rooted in this idea of pilots to policy. So we're part of a whole set of organizations and cities that are trying to prove through research and through pilots that this actually works, and then translate that into policy advocacy. So right now, Springboard is stewarding a statewide coalition in Minnesota that's trying to pass a statewide guaranteed income in Minnesota. And that's rooted in all of these organizations' experiences of actually delivering guaranteed income. And I think there's something really powerful and important about saying, like, we don't have to wait to try these things. We can actually do things that make a practical difference in people's lives now, and then use that to create greater policy or system change. Yeah, so that is just a brief overview of our program and some of the things we've learned over the last several years. Again, I'm happy to talk more about it once we get into the Q&A, but I will stop sharing my screen now and hand it back to you, Rebecca.
Thank you. And I'll hand it over to Nati, and I'll pull up that in 1 second.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. So good to hear updates on how it's all going in Minnesota. Pilots to policy, yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Nati Linares, and go back, please, Rebecca. And I am a co-founder and an organizer at Art.coop. We exist to make the solidarity economy movement irresistible, and we always put a star or a citation on irresistible to cite the work of Black feminist culture worker Toni Cade Bambara, who said, "As a culture worker who belongs to an oppressed people, my job is to make the revolution irresistible." And that's usually the quote that is shared from her, but it's part of a much larger meditation and challenge to power, wealth, and the dominant systems, which I'm sharing in this slide here. So it means a lot to be reconnecting right now. Thank you, Next City, Rebecca, Melissa, everyone. It means a lot to be connecting with fellow travelers in the art of economic justice, like Laura calls it, or the arts and solidarity economy world, like Annie. And new folks like Erica and all of you here. I see a lot of new faces who I don't know. I'm really grateful to be in this space with new folks. And I'm excited to share what I've learned in my 8-year journey in the solidarity economy movement and my previous decade plus journey in the music business, and all the things that I also continue to unlearn. And I invite us all to bring a high level of curiosity, imagination, and courage as we face what Naomi Klein recently called end times fascism. And when I, like you, are doom scrolling and I'm spiraling in fear and hopelessness, I remember my ancestors, people of the global majority who faced oppression and survived in the face of it all. I remember that it is our Black, Indigenous, disabled, queer, trans, working class histories, herstories, them stories, that we have always had stories of people who struggled, who innovated, who cooperated, who perished, who birthed, who lived, who healed, who created, despite facing their own apparent end times, whether it was a slavery and dispossession that founded America, the current horrors of genocide and mass murder, the colonialism, the violence. But I bring that up to say that we've been here before, and that's why we at Art.coop like to say, remember the future, like really remember, really root in our past as we look ahead and face this mess. And as I was preparing, I made an impromptu mood board here that you can see with some cute merch that I really like from a collective in San Diego, that art can pacify or art can spark revolution. And some other quotes from the philosopher Olufemi Taiwo. Stay back, Rebecca, who shared after the inauguration this year, "Our ancestors did more with less against worse. Lock in." Another quote that sat with me was during the Grammys this year. The Americana artist Sierra Farrell said from the stage, live, "It's spiritual warfare out there." And I don't think there's been a more apt time for this Toni Morrison quote, which she shared in 2015 after the first time Trump was elected, where she wrote in The Nation magazine, "This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There's no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, just like art. And so you can stay on this slide because there's one more thing I'm also thinking about besides my ancestors. I'm thinking about my descendants. I have two sons who are 3 years old and 5 years old. So this really stuck with me again from Olufemi in his book, Reconsidering Reparations. He says, we should think of our ancestors, but we will win or lose our own ethical battles based on what we do for our descendants. We're defined by what kind of ancestors we choose to be. So this is where the solidarity economy comes in. It's kind of a big lead in into it, but it's about what we're remembering, how we are resisting, and what we are building. And so again, Art.coop exists to make the solidarity economy irresistible. And we're a baby organization compared to Springboard for the Arts, who I deeply admire. And there's a little bit of an origin story with Springboard for the Arts I can share later. And also East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, who I worked with when I was at the New Economy Coalition. But Art.coop formed after a report I co-wrote with the artist and educator Caroline Willard in 2021 for Grant Makers in the Arts, which is this country's national association of both public and private arts funders. The report was called Solidarity Not Charity, which you can see here, Arts and Culture Grant Making in the Solidarity Economy. So if you're here, as Rebecca mentioned, from an organization affected by the NEA cuts, or if you're a funder, I urge you to read the report in this time. It chronicles the rich legacy of artists building systems change through cooperatives, mutual aid, and care, or what is called the solidarity economy. Next slide, please. The term solidarity economy is used internationally to describe sustainable and equitable community control of work, food, housing, technology, culture, all the things we need to survive, using a variety of organizational forms, from cooperatives to time banks to non-extractive loans. There's a whole process that happened to outline the principles, including cooperation, participatory democracy, equity, pluralism, meaning that we don't have all the answers. There is more than just one way. There are many ways. The movement emerged in Chile and France in the 1980s. It gained popularity in Latin America in the 90s, and it spread globally after the World Social Forum in Brazil in 2001. There's also a UN interagency task force on the social and solidarity economy and various networks in the United States, which I'll share later. So if you leave today with anything, solidarity economy includes what we're talking about, the collective stewardship, meaning who owns, controls, maintains, plus democratic governance, or who decides. Next slide, please. This is another, Rebecca was like, give me all the definitions. It's really hard to have a definition of the solidarity economy because it's all encompassing. It's everything in our lives. But this is a definition from the US Solidarity Economy Network. Solidarity economy is a framework that connects people and practices that are aligned with solidarity economy values, which I went over, articulating a post-capitalist world. And that's really an important part of the solidarity economy. Next slide. And here you can see the people and practices that make up the solidarity economy. This isn't comprehensive, but if you're looking at the cycle of an economy from creation to production, exchange, consumption, surplus, you can see examples of how solidarity economy shows up in our economy. And so if you've ever participated in a tool library or a barter or a free store, or a community garden, you have been participating in the solidarity economy. Next slide, please. And so we don't need to wait for revolution because solidarity economy practices exist around us today, all around us today. Our task is to make these practices visible, to grow, and to connect them. And at Art.coop, we know that our artists, our story keepers, our creators, our artists are going to be critical in helping us make this movement visible and to inspire collective imagination around what's possible. Next slide. So that's where art.coop comes in. Again, we're still quite new. We're a hub where artists get money, connection, and tools to strengthen their communities. We're a part of the movement to remember future art worlds with community control at the core. We uplift, we support, and we connect artists who are building the worlds we want. Because like Laura said, artists are just people. We're trying to, it's not just the art world. The point is to transform the world through practices and principles of the solidarity economy, where they are their own bosses, there are no landlords, and they decide how money flows. Next slide, please. And this is our slogan. We're gonna have, we have some t-shirts and posters. The solidarity economy needs artists, and artists need a solidarity economy. It's clear that artists need a solidarity economy if we're to overcome our status as exploited workers, and likewise, our movements need artists if it is to prevail. There have never been radical movements without radical artists and creators at the helm. And so here's an example of how art.coop thinks about the role of artists in building a solidarity economy or an economic justice movement. We think about it in the top right corner here, process and product in quotes. So for process, how can artists collaborate, own their spirits, their work, and get their needs met in line with their principles? And then product, what can artists create that can invite people into practices and paradigms beyond capitalism? And so on the left, we have an example of a product made by Caroline Willard. Actually, this is one of the inspiring propaganda pieces I saw when I first was like, who are artists making this stuff? And it just draws a sharp dichotomy between the world we want and the world we have. And then below is an example of process. This is art.coop's pilot fellowship, Remember the Future, where we're resourcing 6 artist collectives and cooperatives at $15,000, and they get technical assistance and for a year. And so these are groups that are very much examples of in process, how they're meeting their needs. And then I was asked to do a quick case study. I just wanted to go quickly through the next slide. Rebecca. We have, in the next slide, we have obvious agency. I don't know if the slide cut off, but this is an example of a theater cooperative on our website, art.coop. We're updating the directory this year, but one of our big goals this year is to really get a comprehensive mapping of what are projects around the country. Next slide, obvious agency is a worker-owned cooperative theater company. Next slide, that are worker-owned, grounded in anti-capitalist, anti-racist, non-normative, liberatory feminist frameworks. They work collectively. They split their labor and remuneration transparently and unanimously on a project-by-project basis. And again, this is just one example. It's so difficult to even fit this in 10 minutes, but there are tons of other examples at our website. I hope and invite you to check out further resources. Art.coop is a member of a larger solidarity economy network called the New Economy Coalition. There are various courses if you're new to this. I know it can be quite overwhelming, but please connect with me and I can plug you in with and on-ramp you. So thank you so much, everyone, today. And lastly, I know, Rebecca, it's at our time, but I wanted to bring up Yanita Castro's comment on the NEA cuts when she said, we create the conditions for culture to flourish. We attend to our social relations. We nurture the commons into radical belonging, manifest our futures in the public, and create art not because it makes bucks, but to buck power. So I'll put a link to her full meditation in this moment, which I thought was relevant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nakti. Okay, transitioning a bit more to the spaces in which culture happens. I'm going to hand it over to Erica.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. I really love and appreciate this conversation. I'm coming to you from Treaty 13 territory north of the Medicine Line, and really my heart is with all of you in love and solidarity, what you're going through right now. Know that your Canadian siblings are thinking about you a lot right now. I'm an urban planner. This is my second career. My first was in arts and culture and primarily queer theater. And so I'm coming from that perspective, that kind of lived experience of creating and trying to find space and running a theater company and things like that. So for the past 10 years, I've been really interested in community land trusts and have been researching and exploring them, and recently really trying to explore the sort of emerging form of cultural land trusts, and just bumping this book again, edited by Rana Amirtmasebi and Jason Schubach. Just came out. It's super expensive right now, but if you want a code, we can find you one. Also, in about a year, it's going to come out in paperback and be way, way cheaper, like $50. So chapter 4.5 is the chapter that I wrote, cultural CLTs, and as an emerging solution to the artist space crisis. So I just wanted to sort of go over a couple of questions that often come up. One is sort of, what is a community land trust? Because there are so many different forms and iterations of community land trusts, it's like a shifting model. So just to sort of anchor it in a kind of a definition, that we would define a community land trust as a not-for-profit organization that acquires and stewards land for the benefit of a local community, typically a place-based community. A CLT's aim is really to provide permanent, affordable space. The space can be agriculture, housing, commercial space, community space, arts and culture space. It can be anything. It can be green space. It can just be environmental access to environmental conservation areas, things like that. It is a membership-based organization and is governed by the community. So the community members vote on an elected board of directors. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Typically, the lands owned by a CLT are never resold. The whole idea is to take it off of the market, to decommission its commodity status, and to put it in Marxist terms, to transform from an exchange value to a use value. CLTs are growth models. So the idea is to expand and to use any revenue to purchase more land and to get more space for people and to take more and more land off the market. Any land that can be like decommodified is kind of the goal. These organizations are community serving. And so what the community needs is what the land will be used for. If it's primarily housing, then it's housing. If it's affordable commercial space, then it really is up to the community to decide what the land use is. Sorry, Zach. Okay, and just this feels really important to talk about the origins of the model. Like, this is really an African-American innovation. So the agricultural origins grounded in the civil rights movement. The first CLT was in 1969 in Albany, Georgia, and it was called New Communities, Inc. And in 1970, they acquired a 5,000 acre piece of land, which was a really huge development. Then into the 1980s, land trusts really transitioned into more of residential formats, realizing that it was a way to invest in disinvested and vacant properties and to bring them to life and to give people affordable places to live. Really defined by the dual goals of community empowerment and community development. And into the 1980s, it was really often paired with co-ops. As the kind of growth, especially in Canada, huge growth in the cooperative movement in Canada. So those two pieces went together, where the CLT would own the land and the cooperative would manage the properties on the land. And then the sort of new generation of community land trusts is evolving into a context of like highly gentrified cities and urban context, and it's really about fighting for space in an environment of total financialization of land. So it's really coming from the anti-eviction movements, anti-gentrification, anti-displacement, these tenants' rights activists. It's a very activist movement in the current context. Sorry. So the typical classic, community land trust model would be a kind of a tripartite type of a model, and 1/3 would be like CLT tenants, so people that are tenants on the property, they're residents, they have a direct, investment in running the properties and running the land trust, and then it would be sort of local geographical residents of the broader community, as well as, various different types of stakeholders, whether that's funders, investors, or people with expertise in things like real estate, finance, law, all these kinds of experts that you need to do things like this. And then, oh, sorry, this thing is blocking my view here. So the next question really is, and this is the sort of meat of the topic here, is what is a cultural land trust? What is a creative land trust? There's so many different terms that have been evolving to describe the sort of adaptation of the CLT model to cultural space. And so the first thing I want to say about that is it's really, really important that we don't lose the C in CLT, that we don't lose community, because if these things just become other forms of sort of neoliberal real estate, holding companies, that is not a community land trust. So I want to say that C, community, is really important. So cultural CLTs, what I would call them, or just CLTs, would be nonprofit community-led organizations that hold land for the purpose of creating and maintaining affordable community cultural space in perpetuity. And the first one that I'm aware of, and maybe there are others, so I'd love to hear from you, but is in 2013, the Kenneth Reina Foundation and Community Vision developed the Community Arts Stabilization Trust, CAST, which I'm sure many of you know. They're such an incredible organization based in San Francisco. Would be the first creative CLT that I know about anyway. And then some examples of some CLTs that have evolved since then, or have emerged since then, are in various states of development. Would be Creative Land Trust in London, UK, Cultural Land Trust, which is a project of 221A in Vancouver, a Community and Cultural Spaces Trust, which is Toronto's first cultural land trust. I'll talk about a couple of these later. Artist Space Trust in San Francisco, Austin Cultural Trust, and then Sydney, Australia has one that's in development right now. So some of the key features would be permanence. So the idea is, to decommodify these lands. Affordability is really important, and long-term stability, so that tenants can secure long-term leases, not like these kind of commercial leases that so many artists are dealing with that run out in 5 years and the landlord quadruples the rent and you're effectively displaced. So long-term leases, secure, affordable leases, it really helps to prevent displacement. Reinvestment of revenues back into the CLT, so into expansion, into capital upkeep, into all those kinds of things. Revenues are recycled back into the community. These are typically place-based, as I said, or community-based. For us, they can serve a specific geographical community, but then for an artist, cultural type of CLT, it could also serve a kind of community like artists or arts organizations. They're all community-led, governed by a board of directors. There should be a membership. There should be some kind of representation. There should definitely be artist representation. If you have a community land trust and artists aren't on the board, you don't have a community land trust. It needs to serve community needs. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple little case studies real quick, and then I'm going to wrap up. Community and Cultural Spaces Trust is a City of Toronto's first community land trust. They for culture space. They were founded in 2022 through this project that was to redevelop an old school, which was federal property, it was municipal property, develop an old school into a new housing condo development. And the community really fought to retain some culture space through that process. And what they ended up getting was actually a $2 million settlement that is now they're stewarding that asset. And then a recent development, and partially through the work that I'm doing with the city, as well as through our federal funders, the Community and Cultural Spaces Trust through the Department of Canadian Heritage, and through a really amazing nonprofit organization called In Spirit. The Community and Cultural Spaces Trust was able to actually purchase 2 condominium units within this really interesting commercial artist-led condominium building called Young Place that was formerly related to Artscape. But yeah, check out Community and Cultural Spaces Trust. And if anyone wants to further dive into the artist-run condominium model, I would love to talk to you because I find it fascinating. So Creative Land Trust London, UK, developed by the Mayor of London, funded through Arts Council in England and Outset Contemporary Arts Fund. And it's really to support the artist studio providers in London. There's so many artist studio providers. It's an incredible ecology, something that we don't have at all in Toronto. We have very few studio providers. So they have 3 projects so far: Alice Billings House, Wallace Road Studios, and Friar Park. They're a really interesting organization. So Cultural Land Trust, this is founded by 221A, based in Vancouver, really trying to develop affordable space for artists. They have not acquired any land yet, but they have a number of irons in the fire and really hoping to see that emerge there. They've played an incredible leadership role in the development of like community land trusts and cultural land trusts in Canada. So they're really ones to check out and watch. A really incredible group. Artist Space Trust, I just learned about them more recently, I guess last year, while I was writing this chapter, and met Meg Schiffler, the founding executive director. I come from the arts, I call everyone artistic director. Developed in 2023 by Vital Arts and the Northern California CLT. Amazing organization, really focused on supporting low-income artists and culture bearers, and really interested in transferring generational wealth from aging artists who are maybe, house poor, aging in place, who need support in their, health in their last years and maybe end of life support. So the organization is working on that like trying not to lose those properties, but also trying to care for people in their older years. It's incredible what they're doing. So yeah, definitely check them out as well. So a couple little notes, like how can we as planners, as funders, as organizations that care about this work, like how can we support? For governments, we really need legal definitions of community land trusts to really sort of guide what funding is available, what resources are available. CLTs need seed funding to start up, just to get up on their feet and do their bylaws and do all their strat planning and all of that kind of stuff. They need funding for projects like acquisition projects where they do feasibility studies and different things like that. They need acquisition funding to acquire, put down payments on properties. They need operational funding. This cannot be another tool for governments to devolve more responsibility to community without any funding. Community land trusts need constant funding, and it's something that needs to be covered. Community asset transfer, which would be, a municipality, a city, a state, if they have property, they would actually be able to transfer ownership to the community land trust. That's a really good stewardship practice in terms of, a federal, municipal, or state-run lands. Below market leases could be also an alternative if the states are not, or cities are not willing to give the land, but perhaps they could enter into a long-term lease, nominal lease, a 50-year lease, 100 years, 999 years, as the Creative Land Trust has one of those. CLTs need capacity building support. They need technical assistance, all kinds of things like that. So I'm just going to leave it there. Here are some resources we can pop in the chat if anyone wants to talk about this with me or has any questions. Please feel free to email me at creativespace@toronto.ca and I'll hand it off. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. And then just before we transition to Annie, if the panelists, just for the sake of time, want to answer some of the Q&A questions in the chat, just in case we don't get to them verbally live. Awesome. Okay, last but definitely not least, I want to hand it over to Annie.
Thanks so much. I think you're going to be sharing the slide deck, Rebecca. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. My name is Annie McShiris. I am the Investment and Fundraising Director with the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. And we are a in-practice manifestation of so much of the research and the work and writing that that my other panelists went over today in terms of the importance of cultural space and community space. I'm not seeing that. Oh, there it is. Okay, great. And yeah, we are dedicated to reinvesting in frontline communities. The way that we do that here in the Bay Area, California, which is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country, if not the most expensive, is by creating permanently affordable, community-controlled land, housing, and real estate for communities at the front lines of gentrification and displacement. And in particular, that looks like here in the Bay Area, California, primarily our BIPOC community members are the ones who are facing racialized displacement at much higher rates than our white residents. And I wanted to also just shout out the amazing research that we just learned about through Erica's presentation around community land trusts. We are not a community land trust, but we borrow from the community land trust model, and actually we're very inspired by and work really closely in partnership with community land trusts across the area. We actually created an entirely new model called the Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, and I'll explain a little bit more about the DNA and anatomy of our model in a bit. But just to say that we intentionally created a cooperative model that we could share ownership and share stewardship and operate in the same way that a land trust operates, and that we take land and housing off of the speculative market and move it back into community hands and community control. So we create permanently affordable community controlled assets and are really putting forward a creative solution to the worst of the real estate and financial markets, which are really decimating and extracting from our communities. Next slide. So I wanted to give a little bit of an understanding, a context of the kinds of challenges that we face right here on the ground in terms of why we do the work that we do. And I'm sure everybody on this call knows well about the issues with the challenges of our current capitalist system, which makes land and housing a commodity and not a right. And so we developed these 3 mission pillars, which are right here in the middle of the slide, that go through that there really are our ethical tenets that guide us in the day-to-day work that we do. So land without landlords, we've seen that there's an absence of local collective ownership, and there's also an absence of the ability of people to have control and agency over the places that they live, work, and occupy. And so we decommodify land and housing and create these spaces where people can flourish as artists, as culture workers, in the way that they want to with their time. Restorative economics, we are creating non-extractive financial flows so that people can invest directly into their communities. And so we actually also work with funders and bring in financing that also aligns with restorative economics, and that we specifically support a solidarity economy where we can share resources and have a co-ownership and co-stewardship of land and housing. And then heal people power. This one is a really important one. We have learned really toxic power dynamics through our colonialist systems, through our capitalist system that's based on white supremacy, that's based on the genocide of Native peoples in this country, that's based on slavery. And so we have to do a lot of work to unlearn those toxic dynamics and those toxic ways of thinking and living, and to relearn what it means to actually live in community, what it means to live collectively, and what it means to steward and own collectively as well. So we do a lot of workshops and support of our residents in nonviolent communication, in community agreements, and just supporting the creation of shared resources, whether those be the resources of the physical assets themselves, the land itself, or a toolkit or a spreadsheet that we can share to have transparency on the finances of the collective assets that we're stewarding. We also do a lot of this unlearning and healing work within our own democratically managed collective of 15 staff that manages the permanent real estate cooperative. So really quick, just this anatomy slide really kind of shows our DNA and where we came from and why we were created. So we work to bring tenants together in this community organizing lens. We create limited equity for our resident owners. We borrow from the community land trust model in that we take land and housing off of the speculative market. And we work collectively in a democratically managed workplace as a worker cooperative. The last piece as an investment cooperative is we pool funding from everyday people through this unique direct public offering that we offer, which is that we can sell equity shares to non-accredited investors across the country, which means that we can finance our model without the reliance on government support, without the reliance on big philanthropy. We can bring everyday people in to invest directly into the solutions that we want to have right here in our city. Next slide. So I just want to go over some of the examples of the housing and the assets that we've been able to open up for our residents. To date, we've housed over 50 residents across the Bay Area, which is small in the sense of, the affordable housing space, but large in the sense that all of these folks that live in the housing that we've created are co-stewards and co-owners of these properties. And we've raised a $15 million fund to be able to purchase these properties, rehab them, and support the thriving of these residents in these spaces. And these residents are able to, as artists, as working artists, are able to afford to live in the Bay Area and continue to do the art that they want to be doing. And that really helps to create a thriving culture here across the Bay Area. Next slide. And we also do tenant organizing. So these are both two examples of apartments that we were able to purchase based on our relationship with tenants who were organizing to be able to stay in place. These were both examples of apartments where the landlords were looking to sell, and we were able to come in, organize with tenants, and purchase the properties for community ownership and community control. And now they're able to stay in place and continue to have affordable rates of rent. Next slide. So just to give this example of our biggest flagship property that is directly tied to arts and culture creation. Although I think all of the work we do is tied to arts and culture, and that we are able to continue to support the arts and culture workers and residents of our city by creating affordable spaces. This is a jazz and blues corridor that has been decimated over decades by the city of Oakland, by the forces of big banks and predatory lenders, and by just neglect over the years. The city really drove the BART station through this neighborhood, raised hundreds of houses, and really decimated this corridor over the last few decades. It has previously been Harlem of the West, really big blues and jazz names were there and were thriving. And so we're trying to bring this corridor back to the thriving place that it was, in particular for the Black economy, for the thriving Black economy in West Oakland on the 7th Street corridor. So we purchased Esther's Orbit Room, this old jazz and blues bar that had been the hub of that activity. And we purchased the property next door, and we're looking to purchase more properties in the corridor to be able to revitalize the corridor for community benefit. We've been engaging our community members in revitalizing this corridor for the past several years, and we are looking to reopen in the next year. So we're really excited about that. And this is a rendering of the new space that you can see on the bottom right. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to just breeze through this because I know we don't have very much time left, so we want to have some questions. But just to give you a sense of what is our model and what do these ownership groups look like, we have 600 owners. We have nearly 600 owners in these 4 different ownership types, and they all participate in our model. And we're a multi-stakeholder cooperative, and that makes us unique from a community land trust in that we're not a nonprofit, and we provide community benefit and financial benefit to all of our different owner groups. Our resident owners, investor owners, community owners, and staff owners. Next slide. Okay, I think you can just fast forward to one of the last slides, which just shows some of our Yeah, which just shows some of our key vitals. So this is what we've been able to do to date. Not only do we engage our multi-stakeholder membership, 675 members strong who are all participating in our model and benefiting from our model, but we're also engaging people across the city in thinking about real estate and housing and land in a very new way. And we've been able to raise millions of dollars to be able to do this work. It's not an easy feat because we're not receiving, typical affordable housing developer grants and investments. We're really bringing in community investments to support a community-led and community benefit cooperative model. So I think I'll leave it at that because I want to be able to give time for questions, but please feel free to reach out to me, Annie, at ebprac.org if you're interested in learning more and you have any questions. And we're always looking for more support and partnerships. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That is everybody. We just have like a couple minutes left, and I think the panelists have been doing a good job of answering the Q&A in the chat. I guess I'll just say to the panelists, if there's other ways that people can connect with you after, if they have follow-up questions, maybe post that in the chat. And maybe I'll just ask each of the panelists to share. I mean, I think it goes without saying that we're in a pretty depressing time. But if there's anything around your work or the people you work with or what else is happening in this space that's giving you any fleck of optimism or possibility right now, maybe if you want to just kind of share that to leave it on a, less bleak note.
I just wanted to share and thank you all. I was at a gathering this weekend in Atlanta called Resist and Build. That was bringing together grassroots orgs in Atlanta and also solidarity economy orgs. So the resist, right, the people that are most in danger, and the build, the slower work of the solidarity economy. And one of the projects that inspired me the most that some on this call, like Erica, might be interested in is the Guild. They're creating a network of community land trusts, and that also includes like the activist space that we were in, which was acquired and now under community control. So I was going to put a link to that. I think movements in the South, like in my slides, I put a link to a report about arts and culture movements in the South. I think we always need to be looking, yeah, they say as goes the South, and I was just really inspired by what I saw in Atlanta this weekend. Thank you.
For me, it's the local work. Like, I think when things feel hopeless and really demoralizing, like you got to get outside in your community with your neighbors and building real relationships. And every time I do that and get to be a part of that, that's where the hope lives for me, because people are doing it every day. People are making work, amazing work like we heard about just now, happen all the time in their communities, and those together are all of these signals to the universe that things can be different and can work different. And so, like, that's in moments like this, I gotta touch the work and be with my neighbors and in real community. I think that's where the hope lives, and that's where the future is, and that's all there is to do right now, honestly. Like, just find the people and the organizations and the groups in your community, and get to work.
Erica and Annie, feel free to chime in if you have anything to add.
I was just, I saw this amazing film called Stroll, and I just really love, I'm going to drop a little link in the chat here. There's a really amazing housing project that is developed by trans sex workers in New York. And I'm so inspired by their incredible like leadership and everything. So I'm just gonna pop that in there.
Yeah, I would just say what gives me hope is like creating community resilience and creating our own spaces, even in the face of our, the threat and the direct confrontation of fascism. So just to give an example, we don't rely on any government money. And we've been able to raise dollars from community members and be able to sustain ourselves independent of the ebbs and flows of the political climate. And while I am very much not a proponent of having the government defund these efforts, I think they play a very important role in supporting the creation of affordable cultural and artist spaces. I think the more that we can create the solutions that work for us, even without the reliance on on the government or on wealthy institutions, the more that we can show that these are solutions that really work for people, and eventually maybe the political tides will change and we can actually galvanize the social support that we desperately need from the coffers of government funding.
Well, that brings us to time. I want to thank all of the panelists. I want to thank Next City, who are always such wonderful hosts. I will also just say there will be a third wrap-up session in this series that'll be focused on the role of culture as a tool in other areas of urban planning and policy, like housing, transportation, economic development, public health. So be on the lookout for that. And just thank you so much, everybody, again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.